Welcome back. So, these sessions cover a really tough period for the party of Beastbond, a companion's death on Mount Ghakis, a tragic accident, and then a very deceptive return to Vallaki.
Mm-hmm.
The groundwork here is fantastic. I mean, it shows these brutal consequences of failure. Now we just need to look at how to maximize the lingering impact of it all.
I agree completely. The material is strong, really strong, especially in how it generates these high-stakes failures.
Yeah.
But our job here is to make sure those failures don't just happen to the characters, but that they inhabit them. We're talking about maximizing that narrative reverberation.
Okay, so let's begin where I think the greatest emotional tax is due, but the payment was kind of summarized away.
Right. And here's the core idea. The true horror and significance of major setbacks can be deepened by actively detailing the immediate emotional cost, rather than summarizing the transition away from the tragedy.
And we're talking about two massive events here. First, Traxador's brutal death by the Vrox on the mountain.
Yeah.
And then later, the crushing, accidental death of the maiden after that cart disaster.
Both are inherently dramatic, but after these defining traumas, the notes just indicate the party moves on, almost clinically.
Exactly. If we look at the notes after the maiden's death, it literally says the party simply turns and continues on their way.
And after Traxador's cremation, they only take an hour recuperating before they just, make the strategic decision to descend.
That immediate detachment, that quick bounce back, it really risks minimizing the gravity. It's almost like a kindness to the characters, but it's a cruelty to the drama.
It really is. It turns what should be a defining moment of tragedy into just another waypoint on the map.
Right.
If the characters bounce back instantly, the reader doesn't feel that loss. We're left asking, did that even hurt?
So the problem isn't that the characters don't care, it's that the notes, by just summarizing the action, skip over the necessary emotional processing. It's a pacing choice that kind of deflates the consequence.
Mm-hmm. We need to force them to pay that emotional tax.
And that tax is the story here. But how do we dedicate that space without, grinding the story to a halt? They do have to keep moving.
Well, my suggestion is to dedicate focused, specific space to the character's immediate reactions, coping mechanisms, or just the subtle manifestation of trauma, even if it delays the next plot point by a few narrative breaths.
Okay.
The descriptive quality that was used for Urihorn's mystical bonding with the mountain lion, that intimate sensory detail, that needs to be applied to these moments of distress.
If they can write peace beautifully, they have to write pain just as beautifully.
That makes sense. We're not adding a chapter on therapy.
No.
We're adding a paragraph of sensory detail that carries the weight.
So let's start with the maiden's death on the road.
Okay, so instead of them just turning away, maybe we note how the scene affects the character with the most agency in that moment, Radley.
The Eldritch Knight, right?
He let the cart pass him. Exactly. He carries the heaviest burden of responsibility for that disaster. So you focus on a specific, horrible detail. Suggest that the sound of the girl's scream seems to linger, echoing off the trees, even after the sound of the impact has faded.
That's powerful. It turns a physical sound into an internal psychological scar.
Precisely. Or you could describe a shared, heavy silence between Urihorn and Dermon as they struggle to process their failure to catch the cart. That silence, against the gruesome scene, it speaks volumes. It's the quiet shame of not being fast enough.
And what about on the mountain, after Traxador's cremation? That's a totally different kind of trauma. Almost cosmic.
We just shift the sensory focus there. We lean into the physicality of the grief. Mention the lingering, acrid smell of burning flesh. Not just ash, but the undeniable scent of their friend. Or describe how the physical exhaustion causes the party to move slower, literally dragging their feet through the snow. You make the consequence manifest in the environment.
Yes. That physically represents the weight of loss on the journey back down, making the trauma part of their bodies, not just their thoughts. When you make the reader feel that physical toll, you maximize the cost of the sacrifice.
That focus on the immediate burden leads right into how they handle a similar pressure point later. Moving from that horror on the road to the village, we hit that crucial deception scene with Ismark.
Yeah, which carries its own kind of moral weight.
And this brings us right to our second opportunity. The significant decision to deceive Ismark about Irina's true fate offers an excellent opportunity to inject profound narrative tension into an otherwise straightforward scene.
I mean, they don't tell Ismark the church was burned, the priest was killed, that Strahd demanded Irina.
Or that the mob surrendered her. A terrifying mob.
Yeah, they just say they left her at the church and moved on. The lie of omission is just monumental.
And the weakness is that the reporting of this betrayal is, well, it's flat. It reads like a factual account of what was said instead of a tense, high-stakes moment of coordinated lying. It makes the moral betrayal feel too easy.
And it's made worse by the scene right before it. Ismark is so paranoid that he douses them in holy water to make sure they're not undead.
Exactly.
That test establishes immediate paranoia, but the dialogue that follows doesn't really leverage it.
Precisely. Right now, it sounds easy to lie to a grieving, desperate man who has just shown he doesn't trust them. This is a moment where they cross a moral line, and the notes just have to reflect that weight. The reader needs to be leaning forward, terrified they'll get caught.
So the suggestion has to be about reframing it as a performance.
Absolutely. My suggestion is to frame the interaction not just as a factual report of the lie, but as a delicate performance where every verbal omission and partial truth is loaded with the danger of discovery. This shift would highlight the mental gymnastics Radley and Dareman have to do while facing this desperate Ismark. They aren't just answering questions, they're improvising an alibi under extreme duress.
So how do we translate that internal performance into readable action? What does that high-wire act look like on the page?
You focus on the sensory details, on the physical discomfort of the liars. Describe the effort it took for Radley and Dareman to maintain their composure. Dareman, the arcane trickster, he's usually quick-witted, but here he has to measure every single word.
Maybe he pauses too long before answering.
Yes, or he avoids Ismark's eye contact. That internal pause, described well, transmits the tension directly to the reader.
And you could contrast their state with Ismark's to heighten the stress.
You have to. You contrast the intense urgency of Ismark, who is pressing them about his sister, with the overly controlled, almost rehearsed answers of the party. Maybe Radley, disheveled and exhausted, struggles to hold a serious face. Describe the physical pain of forcing that mask on.
That immediately raises the stakes. We move from just omitting facts to actively performing a denial of trauma, which is so much more dramatic. It builds massive narrative irony.
And that irony is the ticking clock. We have to highlight the palpable relief, mixed with immediate guilt, when Ismark finally accepts the story and rushes off.
Right.
That dual emotion, relief it worked, and guilt over the betrayal, it shows the emotional burden the lie imposes on them. And by making that relief explicit, you emphasize that this omission will have consequences. It's going to hang over them, just waiting to explode.
Okay, now let's circle back to Mount Ghakis, because the failure to reach the Amber Temple and losing Traxador, it needs a better sense of closure. We talked about the emotional toll, but what about the physical arc of the retreat itself?
And that brings us to pacing. The crucial transition phase following the intense Vrock battle and the failure to reach the Amber Temple requires deliberate pacing to fully register the severity of the loss and the strategic necessity of retreat.
The weakness here is structural compression. The notes summarize the retreat from Salinka Pass way too fast. After the death in the battle, it jumps from searching an empty tower for fuel to just a simple summary. They again climb over the wall and then journey back down.
It compresses what should be a grinding, painful withdrawal into just a few quick lines of text.
Yeah.
And this rushes past the physical and psychological toll of abandoning their mission. It leaves the weight of Traxador's sacrifice feeling less impactful. The reader needs to feel that Mount Ghakis rejected them.
Isn't just the rocks. It's the mountain they couldn't conquer.
That's it, exactly. The mountain has to remain an active antagonist, even after the demons are defeated. So, the suggestion is to expand the description of the retreat, making sure the action emphasizes the physical difficulty, the unrelenting cold, and the psychological impact of failure. We need to make the mountainside feel like it's still trying to kill them.
So if we slow down, how do we keep the descent from just becoming a tedious travel log?
Instead of summarizing, you focus on the sheer mechanics of the retreat. The contrast between the adrenaline of the fight and the grinding exhaustion afterward. Detail the The precariousness of climbing down those rigged ropes with fingers that are stiff and frigid.
Mm-hmm. You highlight the effort required to help the less agile party members.
Ah, and you reinforce that earlier description, the evocative one. The notes mentioned the climb up was like a monkey trying to fuck a football.
Right.
That image should be amplified here. Show that same struggle, but now it's compounded by exhaustion and grief and defeat. That grinding effort is magnified when they know they are running from a failed mission, not moving toward a goal.
And the cold is such a constant threat in this section, but it fades once the summary starts. That sensory input has to come back.
It absolutely has to. And a good way to pull that threat back in is to use the character bond as a yardstick. Mention how the mountain lion, Urihorn's new bond, navigates the descent.
Okay.
Though the cat scrambled up a near-vertical surface, showing its strength. You contrast that early strength with the current fatigue. Maybe the mountain lion moves slower now, its fur icing over, or it struggles for a moment to keep its footing on the ice-covered switchbacks over that precipitous drop.
That small detail about the animal's struggle would instantly symbolize the party's own fatigue. It grounds the failure in something tangible and makes the environment the final relentless obstacle.
By applying the physical weight of that failure to the descent, the reader gets the time they need to process Traxidor's death and the strategic failure of the mission. It gives the narrative the closure it needs before they get thrown into the next sequence. It's a strong structural fix.
So these three changes, slowing down for the emotional aftermath, framing the deception as a high-stakes performance, and extending the physical struggle of the retreat, they all work together to amplify the weight of these sessions.
Mm-hmm.
They ensure failure doesn't just happen, but that it leaves lasting, visible scars on the narrative and the characters.
It really elevates the entire submission. The story gains that needed depth and resonance. It forces the reader to sit with the consequences, rather than just read about them.
Exactly.
So, to summarize, we focused on three critical areas to really sharpen the narrative impact. First, dedicate space to the emotional fallout after traumatic events. Use that descriptive sensory detail for moments of grief. Second, exploit the dramatic tension in the deception of Ismark. Frame that scene as a high-stakes, physically painful performance.
Right.
And third, slow down the pacing during the retreat from Mount Ghakis to emphasize the profound physical and psychological cost of failure. Turn the environment itself into a grinding antagonist. We really look forward to seeing the revisions of these compelling sessions. Please feel free to send us your next draft for another critique.
Welcome, listener, to The Deep Dive. We are plunging back into, well, the perpetual gloom of Barovia. It's a place where sanity is really a luxury and survival demands these constant, terrible compromises.
It really does. And today's sources, they're from message.txt, covering sessions 24 and 25. So that's from December 13th to December 20th, 2025.
And these notes, they don't just chronicle a journey. They document a really rapid moral erosion under some intense duress.
Yeah, you said it. These notes describe a period of, unprecedented volatility for the party. We're going to see them making pacts for dark power, suffering a just devastating loss on a treacherous mountain.
And committing what might be their most chilling betrayal yet. Right out on the open road.
Exactly. So our mission today is really to track these rapidly shifting goals. They go from seeking ancient power to, political infiltration, and we need to analyze the psychological and ethical cost of just existing in Ravenloft.
So our surviving core group, we've still got Urihorn Tenpenny, the halfling beastmaster.
And Radley, the human eldritch knight, and Dermon Cobain, the elven arcane trickster.
But we have to acknowledge the tragic vacuum left by the recent death of Traxidor, the half-elf cleric of light. His absence, as both a healer and kind of a moral anchor, it is felt immediately and profoundly in these sessions.
Oh, absolutely. And taking his place, at least for now, is a new, very pragmatic addition. Perlan Goodshadow, a halfling monk.
The stakes have just never been higher.
And the notes, they really force us to ask a question. At what point does the goal of defeating Strahd justify the corruption you need to gain the power to do it? And when does self-preservation just fully extinguish the capacity for basic human decency?
Okay, let's unpack this. by starting in what seems like a safe place where a pretty dark secret is revealed right over dinner.
Yeah, that's the perfect place to start.
So this deep dive, it opens on a brief, almost jarring moment of peace. The party has arrived at the Wizards of Wine.
Right, the vineyard estate. It's protected by the Marduka family, which includes Danica and Erwin, who you'll remember had to flee all that political chaos back in Vallaki.
And they're all gathered for a dinner celebration. It's probably the first truly peaceful moment they've had in weeks.
And it's such a classic narrative technique, isn't it? You create this brief, warm backdrop just so you can reveal the darkness that's been lurking underneath all along.
They're relaxing among allies. They think they're safe. But the moment is just shattered by a simple observation that has these profound implications in a place like Barovia.
And that observation is?
The discovery that Urihorn, the halfling, casts no shadow. The sources are so clear about this, they call him the shadowless halfling.
Wow. For a place governed by the dark powers and just saturated with ancient evil, that is an immediate, glaring spiritual anomaly. You can't just ignore that.
Not at all. And the group's suspicion is, I mean, it's totally justified, right?
Oh, 100%. In the established lore of Ravenloft, losing your shadow is never an accident. It implies a critical detachment from the mortal world, a profound severance, or, and this is the most common one, a contract with one of the dreadful vestiges.
The sentient, ancient entities imprisoned under the Amber Temple.
Exactly. The ones that grant power in exchange for, a piece of your soul or your identity.
But Urihorn, he seems prepared for this. He immediately admits his purpose is total vengeance against Strahd for all the misery in Ravenloft. And to get the power he needed for this one singular mission, he acquired what he calls a mist token.
And that token, he confirms, demanded his shadow as payment.
It's such a complex trade-off, isn't it? He's sacrificed a piece of his very essence for what seems like a noble purpose, defeating the ultimate evil of the land.
And the party, they're exhausted by repeated failure, so they're temporarily placated by this. They just accept the shadow's loss as the necessary cost of competence.
Which raises a crucial question right at the start. Can power that's sourced from the land's own corruption truly be used for salvation? Does the source of that power inevitably taint the mission, no matter how noble the intent?
It almost feels like a bargain he had to make to survive,
I think so. In Barovia, you can't fight the devil with just pure intentions. You need teeth.
Exactly. And the power Urihorn gets is both magical and intensely practical, which we see immediately, the very next morning.
Yeah, that token seems to have enhanced his deepest skill, his connection to the natural world.
Speaking of his specific goals, the next morning he goes on what's detailed less as a simple search and more as this ancient, highly technical ritual, the taming of a powerful beast.
He's described as an expert woodsman, but this feels like it goes way beyond just tracking.
The notes really emphasize this almost shamanistic process. He leaves the winery in the pre-dawn hours, tracking a specific quarry. And it's so detailed. He collects tufts of hair, pieces of tree bark where the prey marked its territory.
So he's gathering reagents.
He is. These organic components are crucial. He gathers a variety of local herbs and then adds the tracking evidence to them, creating this bundle that's both bait and a ritual component.
And he finds his target, a magnificent, fierce mountain lion perched high on a thick branch, and it's not happy to see him. It's immediately territorial, fully prepared to treat this halfling as a small meal.
But Urihorn, armed with his deep knowledge and I think maybe the subtle influence of that mist token, he just refuses the confrontation. And what's fascinating here is his use of these non-aggressive psychological tactics.
Right, instead of drawing a weapon.
He performs a series of slow blinks to calm the beast. In the animal kingdom, that's a universal sign of trust, of non-threat, and it stops the predator cold.
The mountain lion, it was tense, ready to pounce, but now it just starts to pace, and aggression is replaced by curiosity.
And then the ritual culminates. Urihorn rubs this wad of herbs into his hands, infusing his own scent with these powerful calming reagents. Then he gently throws the rest of the bundle on the ground and just backs away, letting the cat approach on its own terms.
And the cat's reaction is just transformative. Apprehension gives way to this overwhelming curiosity about the scent. It leaps down, sniffs it, and then in this amazing display of submission, it just flops into the forest floor and starts writhing in the herbs.
The fight is over. The bond is forming. And the final physical interaction, the cat rubbing its face in the halfling's palms and then eventually just reclining right on top of him as the dawn comes up, that solidifies this mystical symbiotic bond.
And the result is immediate. Urihorn instantly mounts his new companion, this formidable wildcat, and they return to the winery together. He's gone from a vulnerable man to a beastmaster with a loyal, incredibly powerful ally.
And that's critical context. That mountain lion isn't just a pet, it's a force multiplier, an apex predator bound to Urihorn. This bond gives them a critical advantage they will need immediately as they turn their attention to the highest, most dangerous point in the entire valley.
With Urihorn newly empowered, the party reaffirms their goal over breakfast. They have to ascend Mount Ghakis to find the Amber Temple.
A location foretold in Madame Eva's card reading, and it's reputed to be this nexus of ancient forbidden power. Really, the only potential source of strength they think is capable of challenging Strahd.
The quest for the Amber Temple, it feels like a desperate play for competence. They know they're outmatched, and they need that ancient knowledge or some powerful artifact to close the gap.
But even as they commit to this dangerous path, we see just how fragile their alliances are.
That's right. When the adventurers get back on the Svelish road and turn toward the mountain, the druid Riventhal, who they had rescued and traveled with for a while, he just thanks them and unceremoniously departs.
That phrase, unceremoniously departs, it's so significant. It just underlines this relentless theme of self-interest in Barovia. There's no sentimentality, no discussion of strategy, just a quick severing of ties.
Riventhal clearly weighed the danger of the Amber Temple against the benefit and just decided the risk was too great.
Yeah, and the party's immediately reminded that in this land, survival always supersedes loyalty. Every alliance is temporary.
So the remaining group, they turn south onto a gravel road, and the climb begins immediately. The notes detail this rapid, punishing intensification of the conditions.
Oh yeah, they're hit with patches of snow, the temperature just sinks drastically, and they have to deal with this gusting, whipping wind. The road becomes a treacherous switchback, sheer cliff on one side, deadly drop on the other. It's an immediate physical grind.
They're transitioning from the relative safety of the valley floor to a profoundly hostile environment, both physically and magically. The cold itself becomes this constant, grinding enemy before they even meet a single monster.
And their arduous ascent is eventually blocked by this really imposing structure, a defensive wall and a gatehouse that just cuts off the path to the higher reaches of the mountain.
This architecture is pure, dark spectacle. It's designed to repel. We're talking 20-foot high walls, crowned by a gatehouse that's 10 feet higher than that. The size alone is intimidating.
And then on top, you have two colossal statues that look like ominous vultures. And the wall itself is lined with these tall stone spikes. It just screams, "Do not enter."
And the most immediate, terrifying obstacle is the passage itself. The portcullis is dropped, and just beyond it, a colossal wall of green flame is burning furiously. This isn't just a fire, this is clearly powerful, lethal magic, possibly infernal.
And their immediate response is just perfectly pragmatic. It's exactly how survivors operate. They stick an arrow into the flames.
And it instantly bursts into fire.
Confirming it's real, not an illusion. Very dangerous energy. They can't just pass through it. This forces them into a difficult decision, which is compounded by the rapidly deteriorating weather.
Their solution requires Urihorn's new beast companion. Despite the mountain lion's reluctance to climb sheer rock, Urihorn commands it to scramble up the near vertical surface of the cliff face right next to the gate.
And once the cat is at the top, Urihorn uses one of the wall's defensive spikes as a makeshift snubbing post and throws a rope down to the party below.
It becomes this exhaustive, protracted effort to haul the entire party, including Radley and Derman, over that 20-foot wall.
And this is a critical detail. They are physically draining themselves before the inevitable confrontation. They're spending vital energy reserves that they're going to need for the battle to come.
Once they're over, their thoughts immediately turn to survival against the elements. They spot a white stone guard tower nearby, and they're just desperately speculating about shelter. The temperature is sinking toward truly lethal levels, threatening to end their quest not by monster, but by hyperthermia.
But the mountain, it had other plans.
Their desperate musings on shelter are just interrupted by this horrifying, piercing sound, an unearthly screeching that cuts right through the howling wind. Looking back, they realize the two enormous vulture-like statues atop the gatehouse are no longer statues.
They're animated.
Yeah. The terror of the surprise attack is multiplied by the reveal that they are facing something far worse than standard undead. These creatures flap down, landing right in the middle of the party.
And the notes confirm their demonic nature. They're nearly 10 feet tall, terrifying 15-foot wingspan, and they emit this palpable, stinking miasma of fetid decay. They are later identified as Vrox, powerful demons from the abyss.
This is a tactical nightmare. These aren't just brute force combatants. Vroks are specifically designed to incapacitate groups, to neutralize defenses and control.
Absolutely. Let's dissect their brutal methodology. They attack on multiple fronts at the same time. First, they periodically unleash this cloud of spores designed to cause uncontrollable retching and convulsions.
So a crippling physical attack that takes targets out of the fight immediately.
And second, they deploy these deafening magical screams that assault the mind and stun anyone who hears them. It's a perfect 1-2 punch. Incapacitate the body with spores. Incapacitate the will with a scream.
And while the party is convulsing or stunned, the Vroks use their primary physical attack. Runding with these great scythe-like claws. The party's typical tactics are just thrown into chaos.
The tactical dynamics here are really revealing. Dermon, the arcane trickster, he relies on stealth and opportunity. He only engages when enemies are distracted, which is a difficult task when everyone is stunned or retching.
And Radley, the Eldritch Knight, he's forced to alternate wildly between his sword, offensive magic like Firebolt, and then necessary defense with his shield spell. But without a dedicated healer to remove the conditions, the spores and the screams are just deadly.
Urihorn, mounted on his great cat, wisely avoids the epicenter of the melee. He uses the cat's mobility to shoot arrows while he's trying to scout the tower, and he finds the door is barred from within, which just emphasizes their isolation.
And the lack of a cleric, the lack of Traxador, is suddenly and tragically magnified. The Vrok's ability to cause these widespread debilitating conditions, it requires instant healing and counter magic, which Traxador used to provide.
And because he was the most visible source of light, of life and healing in this dark land, the notes state he was the one hardest pressed by the demons. He falls under the barrage of claws and spores, slowly bleeding out amid the carnage before the demons just slay him completely.
It's a devastating, irreversible blow. Traxador was the moral compass, the source of restoration, and now he is simply gone. It confirms the brutal cost of even attempting to reach the Amber Temple.
So with him dead, and the remaining members exhausted, wounded, and spent of their magical resources, the immediate pragmatic decision is made. The quest is abandoned. They cannot continue upward.
This moment, it feels like the true turning point of this whole deep dive. The dream of the Amber Temple, the hope for ancient power, is deferred by a violent death.
It's a harsh reminder that the environment of Barovia will punish overreach relentlessly. They literally drag their bodies over that wall, only to realize they didn't have the strength to survive the gatekeeper.
The first step after that brutal battle is a necessity dictated by the cold. They have to dispose of their fallen friend, Traxador. And the chosen method is profoundly unsettling.
Yeah, it really is. At the Selenka Pass gate, the party honors their fallen cleric by creating his body in that mysterious wall of green flames that blocks the passage.
It's a shocking symbolic act. They're using the infernal barrier that ended their quest to dispose of the body of their cleric of light.
Just think about the psychological toll of that. Using an evil, seemingly unholy energy source to perform a rite of passage for a virtuous companion. It just underscores the utter desperation and the blurring of moral lines that is now standard operating procedure for this group.
After this grim closure, they turn back to the White Tower for shelter. Radley boosts Urihorn up to the second-story window, and the halfling once again slips past the iron bars. He's their scout and their key.
Urihorn reports back on a strange, empty interior. He then heads to the parapets, finding 10 tall, golden statues of female knights, clearly figures of defense or dedication.
And, ominously, several chainmail-clad skeletons half buried in the snow.
Which suggests that many have tried and failed to hold or pass this point before them.
He finds nothing of value on the frozen skeletons, and after unbarring the door, they discover the tower, while it's structurally sound, is useless for true rest. It has a hearth, but no fuel. They realize they cannot survive the night there.
So after taking only a single hour to patch their wounds and catch their breath from the Vrok assault, they choose immediate descent. This whole sequence is a masterclass in prioritization. They are not heroes seeking glory. They are survivalists, prioritizing warmth and safety over recovery or exploration.
They climb back over their ropes and begin the long, exhausting descent down Mount Ghakis.
Once they hit the main Svalich road, they choose the village of Barovia as their next objective. They need to resupply, get warm, purchase new equipment to replace what they lost on the mountain.
But as they approach the western gates of Barovia, they intercept a highly disturbing convoy.
And this is the critical juncture where the narrative shifts from physical survival to profound moral failure. They catch up to travelers from Valaki town guards they recognize, and about a half-dozen villagers who are laboring to push a heavy cart up the steep road toward Castle Ravenloft.
And the cart's terrifying contents are immediately visible. Inside, a young woman is bound to posts, clearly dressed for a ritual sacrifice. She's in white, adorned with mountain flowers.
But her beauty is just overshadowed by her terror. Her countenance is fearful, her wrists are raw from desperate attempts to free herself. They realize instantly this is a victim being delivered to Strahd.
Their initial reaction is pure, instinctive heroism. They immediately decide to ambush the guards and free the maiden before the group reaches the castle. And the execution is swift and clinical. Expert arrow shots and a magical firebolt dispatch the guards instantly.
Before the villagers or the maiden can even fully process what's happening.
But the immediate success is followed by a catastrophic failure of execution and judgment. Seeing the guards killed, the villagers instantly flee, scattering into the woods.
Critically, the cart is left unattended on the steep, ascending Svalich road. Gravity immediately takes hold, and the cart begins to roll backwards, uncontrolled, picking up devastating speed.
It's just a devastating sequence. Urihorn and Dermon both try to catch the cart's frame as it rockets past them, but their hands slip on the accelerating wood. They just don't have the mass or the leverage to stop it.
And the speeding cart approaches Radley, the party's Herculean fighter, the man who has stood toe-to-toe with demons and survived. This is the moment where physical competence meets psychological collapse.
The notes state it so clearly. Radley opts to step aside and let it rumble past.
Here is where the weight of the last 48 hours just crushes the hero. Why did he step aside? We have to analyze this beyond a simple plot device. Radley is physically capable of stopping, or at least slowing that cart, but he's mentally spent.
He just watched his friend die, was nearly killed by demons, cremated his comrade in infernal fire.
That choice to let the cart go, it could be read as calculated indifference, a momentary triage where he prioritizes his own safety over a high-risk, low-percentage chance of saving a stranger. Or, and this is maybe more psychologically devastating, it's a trauma response, a moment where the accumulated horror just paralyzed his will to act.
And the consequence is horrific. The maiden shrieks in terror as the cart gains impossible speed. It flies over the embankment at a sharp bend in the road, is dashed violently against stony outcroppings, and it just disintegrates into splinters.
The notes state it with brutal clarity. The maiden's crushed corpse lies splayed amid the wreckage.
And this next detail is arguably the most brutal of the entire deep dive. After briefly viewing the carnage, the crushed body, the shattered wood, the party simply turn and continue on their way.
No discussion, no grief, no attempt to bury the body, no moment of recognition that their heroic impulse resulted in an agonizing, unnecessary death.
This scene perfectly encapsulates the brutalizing nature of their environment. They have achieved a level of emotional bankruptcy where an innocent, agonizing death, directly caused by their actions, is met with cold dismissal. They have officially prioritized their immediate goal of buying equipment over the life they just tried and failed to save.
Their moral capacity has completely eroded under the pressure of Barovia.
So the party enters the village of Barovia under the cover of night, carrying this immense psychological weight: Traxidor's death, the cart maiden's fate. Radley, in particular, must be dealing with immense survivor's guilt, having lost Valinair and now Traxidor, his original comrades.
That internal stress, it has to find an outlet, and it manifests immediately in his choices. First, they head to the only tavern, the Blood of the Vine, and the atmosphere there is just one of profound, resigned desolation.
The sullen barman, Eric, is serving only water. Even the small, temporary comfort of wine is denied to the desperate inhabitants of Barovia.
It's in this setting they find a small, temporary reprieve. They meet Perlman Goodshadow, the only other halfling seen in the village of Barovia. He's a monk, and after hearing the dangers the party faces, and likely recognizing the dangers in the village itself, Perlman agrees to join forces.
So they quickly patch the manpower gap left by Traxidor.
But while this new alliance is forming, Radley is drawn away. Mirabelle, a Vistani proprietor, recognizes him. She approaches him in this sultry fashion, making unsubtle references to his recently missing companions.
And instead of offering grief, she offers him an alternative distraction to the barrenness of the village.
And Radley eagerly accepts. This eldritch knight is seeking a desperate temporary escape. He agrees to spend the evening with Mirabelle and her sisters, Alenka and Sorvina. This immediate embrace of hedonism is a classic trauma coping mechanism. a desperate attempt to numb the pain and psychological horror of the last few days through indulgence.
That pursuit of a rote, desperate distraction stands in stark contrast to what the remaining trio experiences. Urihorn, Derman, and Perlan head out to find shelter, and they run into one of Barovia's most insidious threats. The old hag, Morgantha.
Right. She's pushing her cart, slyly trying to sell her addictive dream pastries for a single gold coin.
The trio, ever distrustful, they brusquely refuse her wares. But Morgantha, completely unfazed, delivers this chilling line. She insists someone else will buy them as she never returns home with unsold pies.
And that statement is so critical. It reinforces the ubiquitous nature of this invisible, insidious evil that grips the populace. While Radley is escaping his trauma through self-medicating hedonism, the rest of the town is caught in the subtle, pervasive addiction that literally preys on their dreams.
Both choices just reflect the profound misery that Barovia inflicts. So the trio finds an abandoned house, barricades themselves inside, and settles down for a restless night, while Radley is elsewhere.
Day 19 begins with Radley rejoining the group. The notes describe him as disheveled and wearing a dopey expression, clearly showing the physical signs of his night of deep, desperate indulgence.
And the contrast is immediate. The eldritch knight, smelling of drink and perfume, is instantly thrust into this urgent political and emotional confrontation. They go immediately to the burgomaster's manor to seek out Ismark, who has taken up his late father's mantle.
Ismark opens the door, but his demeanor is highly suspicious. He demands to know who these three strangers are. He last saw Radley with Traxador and Valinair.
And his paranoia is taken to an extreme degree. Without warning, Ismark abruptly splashes the entire party with a bucket of water.
Immediately explaining it was holy water, and he had to ensure they were not undead spawn of Strahd. This is an act of welcoming. It's a necessity born of the acute paranoia that infects every resident of Barovia.
So once they're soggily inside, the conversation immediately turns frantic. Ismark asks urgently about his sister, Irina. Radley and Derman relay the tale of the vampire spawn's attack on Vallaki 8 days prior.
And Ismark is frantic. He's clearly received little to no accurate news in the valley. And this is the moment of moral collapse. Ismark is desperate for truth, and the party, seeing an opportunity for self-preservation, commits a highly strategic deception.
They intentionally conceal several critical, damning facts from Ismark.
Let's break down the layers of this betrayal. They omit that St. Andrew's Church was burned to the ground and the priest was killed in the chaos.
They conceal the terrible truth that Strahd had demanded Irina from the townsfolk, and most damningly, they fail to mention that the terrified mob had literally pulled Irina from the Blue Water Inn and surrendered her to the vampire lord.
Instead, they offer a carefully constructed half-truth. They say they had merely escorted her to the church for safety and then left town to seek refuge at the Wizards of Wine. They're protecting their own reputation and avoiding confessing the failure that led to Irina's capture.
It's a necessary move to secure Ismark as an ally, as a shield, as they try to re-enter Vallaki.
And Ismark, distraught by the incomplete information, insists they must leave immediately to save his sister. The party agrees with this suspicious haste, not for altruistic reasons, but because they desperately need to retrieve their lost amulet of Ravenkind from the new burgomaster, Lady Washer.
Ismark just dashes out, sword-girded, urging haste.
Think about the depth of this betrayal. They are manipulating their friend's grief and dedication, marching him straight into a town they know is under the control of a dark cultist, without giving him the vital, life-saving context that his sister is already likely compromised.
And that the townspeople themselves are responsible for her capture.
They're using him as a pawn to retrieve a necessary artifact. It's cold.
So Ismark is driven by this singular purpose. He's marching like a possessed man back towards Vallaki. He barely even registers the marks near the western gates of Barovia, where the cart maiden sacrifice turned into tragedy. His focus is entirely on Irina.
On the journey, the party fills him in on the political chaos, the deposition of Baron Vargas Vlakovic, and the seizure of the title of Burgomaster by Lady Wachter.
And Ismark offers a crucial piece of lore here. He shares that the Wachter family is very old in Barovia, dating back to before Strahd even arrived in the valley.
That's a fascinating detail, isn't it? It suggests that Wachter isn't just some political climber. She might represent a deeper, older corruption in Barovia, perhaps a rival power structure or a collaborator with something far more ancient than Strahd himself.
It raises the stakes significantly. They come up with a plan. Since Radley, Urihorn, and Derriman are fugitives, Ismark and Perlman, the strangers, will try to convince the guards to open the gate under the pretext of Ismark's urgent mission, setting up an ambush.
But Watcher's security is immediately apparent. The ruse fails instantly. The guards, loyal to the new burgomaster, are fiercely suspicious and totally unimpressed by Ismark's minor status.
They insist on strict, non-negotiable orders not to allow strangers in, belligerently demanding that Ismark and Perlman leave immediately.
This confirms two things. One, the party is still very much wanted fugitives in Vallaki. And two, Lady Watcher's regime is far more tightly controlled and ruthlessly pragmatic than the previous Baron's chaotic, delusional rule. A direct confrontation at the gate is just impossible.
So, retreating to concealment, the party realizes the gates are the only heavily garrisoned area. They move northward to a secluded section of the city wall, deciding to use stealth and agility to bypass the guards.
They recognize the immense risk involved, though. They vividly recall their last encounter with Lady Watcher, where her personal bodyguard of devils required the intervention of Rudolf van Richten to save them. They are infiltrating a known layer of infernal power, and they have no cleric to heal them this time.
They sprint toward the wall, waiting for the momentary cover of the ever-present mist to obscure a single sentry's vision. And the ascent is, predictably, a mixed bag of grace and awkwardness.
The notes describe the climb humorously. They say some glide over easily while others struggle in a manner resembling a monkey trying to fuck a football.
That small injection of humor is important, I think. It's a necessary stress relief for a party under incredible strain.
It is. But regardless of their grace, they all make it over, dashing immediately for the concealment of the houses within the town.
Their target is clear. Lady Watcher's home, which they correctly identify as the keeper of all the secrets in the town, and they decide the safest, most discreet entry point is the basement root cellar.
They successfully descend into this vacant root cellar, which has a dirt floor. But as they move, the telltale sound of crumbling dirt heralds an ambush. 8 animated skeletons claw their way violently from the earth to menace the party.
This is Watcher's defense system for subterranean entry, but what's fascinating here is how this fight contrasts with the traumatic battle against the rocks. This confrontation serves as a powerful demonstration of the party's profound evolution as combatants.
Yeah, this highlights their transformation from clumsy adventurers to hardened, lethal survivors. Radley, who began as a simple man-at-arms, has been forged in the crucible of weeks of combat into a ruthless eldritch knight, proficiently combining spells and swordplay.
They're better equipped, ruthlessly coordinated, and just far more efficient. The adventurers effortlessly cut and smash through them.
What would have been a terrifying, resource-draining battle just weeks ago is now little more than maintenance work. The fight is over almost before it begins, demonstrating their sheer increase in physical competence, even if their moral compass is, shattered.
They are now just better at survival.
After dispatching the skeletons, they start searching the room and note a crucial environmental clue: heavy foot traffic. The wear pattern in the dirt floor runs heavily from the exterior door to a specific far wall,
Which suggests a pathway used often by something or someone significant to Watcher's operations.
Investigating the wall, they apply pressure and find it easily spins on a fulcrum, revealing a secret chamber beyond. This is the moment they bypass all her overt security and breach Watcher's true private operations.
And the disturbing contents are laid bare in the empty room. 5 chairs surrounding a carefully drawn pentagram on the floor.
This disturbing revelation immediately confirms the nature of Lady Watcher's power base. The pentagram is the unmistakable sign of infernal or demonic ritual.
And the presence of 5 chairs is also significant. It suggests a coven or a dedicated ritual group, maybe the 5 people required for specific pacts or summoning rites.
This discovery reinforces why she had a bodyguard of devils when they last met her. Watcher's not just a political schemer. She is an active participant in dark rites, ruling Vallaki by infernal contract.
This confirms the immense danger the party is in, especially since they are now standing literally beneath the home of a dark worshipper whose primary objective is to stop anyone who threatens Strahd.
They have infiltrated the lair of a power structure that may even predate the Dark Lord himself. They came to steal an amulet, but they have stumbled upon the very source of corruption in the new Vallaki regime.
We have completed a deep dive into 2 turbulent sessions, listener, tracking a party that has evolved from desperate adventurers into, ruthless survivalists.
It's quite a transformation. We witnessed Urihorn's profound sacrifice of his shadow for a mystical bond, the brutal failure and cost of Traxador's life on Mount Ghakis.
And the shocking moral collapse on the Svalich Road, culminating in the cold, immediate dismissal of the cart maiden's agonized death.
The central themes are just so clear. The pursuit of power necessitates compromise. The price of the mist token was Urihorn's essence. The price of the Amber Temple quest was Traxador's life.
And the price of their rush to Barovia was the life of an innocent they failed to save. Their emotional and ethical compass is now severely compromised. They are highly efficient, but increasingly callous.
Yeah, and they've re-entered Vallaki under the guise of Ismark's grief, hiding the crushing truth of Irina's capture. They are now literally beneath the home of Lady Water, a woman whose operations clearly involve the ritualistic worship of dark powers, proven by that pentagram chamber.
This raises a final provocative thought for you to consider as they move forward. They are now expert survivors in a land designed to break them.
So given the terrible things they have seen and done, using infernal fire for cremation, their indifference to human life, and the tactical deception of their friend Ismark, are they still seeking to save the land of Barovia, or have they simply become the most capable, morally hollow creatures within its misery?
And what price, ultimately, will they pay when Lady Watcher inevitably realizes they have uncovered the dark nature of the power she is truly serving in that pentagram room?
This is The Brief on Dungeons & Dragons Sessions 24 and 25. All right, so this story arc takes the party way deeper into Barovia, that gloomy vampire-ruled land, and we're talking about a huge character moment, a absolutely brutal fight on a frozen mountain, and the start of a really dangerous political conspiracy. First up, let's talk about the Beastmaster, Urihorn Tenpenny. To get his hands on a powerful mist token for his revenge quest, he paid a chilling price. He's now completely shadowless. But even so, he managed to form this incredible bond with a mountain lion, using an ancient ritual of slow blinks and herbs to mystically seal their partnership. Honestly, this new ally might be the only thing that keeps him alive. But that high point just didn't last. Second, we have the battle on Mount Ghakis. The party was climbing toward the legendary Amber Temple, a place of immense power, when a fortified gatehouse blocked their path. And the guards? 2 giant vulture statues that came to life as Vroks, powerful winged demons. The fight was desperate, exhausting, and in the end, the group suffered a terrible loss. Their cleric, Traxador, was killed. The survivors had no choice but to retreat, cremating their friend in some mysterious green flames before abandoning the quest. So after that disaster, they descended the mountain, recruited a new companion, a halfling monk named Perlin Goodshadow, and shifted their focus. Finally, a dangerous infiltration. They successfully sneak into the home of the new burgomaster, or village leader, Lady Wachter. Down in the basement, they destroy 8 animated skeletons, and then find a secret chamber. And what's inside is chilling. 5 chairs surrounding a massive pentagram, pretty much confirming the new leadership is tied to some kind of deadly cult. So what we're seeing is a tragic mix of profound personal moments, the brutal cost of challenging evil in Barovia, and clear signs of a terrifying conspiracy just beginning to unfold.
Welcome to The Debate. We are returning today to the unforgiving landscape of Barovia, focusing on a really pivotal moment for the halfling Beastmaster, Urihorn Tenpenny.
Right, during sessions 24 and 25. And this is where he's driven by this deep need for revenge against Strahd. And, well, he has to make an ultimate choice.
He does. He has to pay a metaphysical price. He sacrifices his own shadow to get a mist token, this artifact that's supposed to aid his cause. And the question we're wrestling with today is both practical and deeply existential. Does Urihorn's calculated sacrifice of his shadow represent a justified strategic commitment, something vital for operating in Barovia? Or does it signify a profound, compromising existential cost that fundamentally undermines his ability to achieve his goals?
Frame it. I mean, we are dissecting the high cost of what some might call necessary cruelty. And I firmly argue this transaction constitutes an irreversible existential debt. The moment Urihorn lost his shadow, he compromised his very nature. In the context of Ravenloft, this isn't just poetic. It's a visible, spiritual abnormality that marks him.
And I would argue this was perhaps the most rational choice he could have made, given his mission. His actions weren't rash. They were rooted in explicit strategic necessity. He needed power, and he needed it now.
Sure.
He stated clearly his mission required the mist token, and the shadow was simply the currency. And we can't overlook the immediate, tangible utility this price yielded. The very next morning, he successfully uses that token to bond with an apex mountain lion. This cat becomes an essential, mission-critical resource. The commitment yielded immediate results.
And I acknowledge the impressiveness of that bond. I do. The power it conferred is undeniable. However, I don't frame it as a successful trade, but as a Faustian bargain with immediate, damning consequences. The loss of a shadow, especially in these lands, is not a simple transactional cost. It is a visible liability, and we have proof. During the celebration at the Wizards of Wine, the Mardukov family, who are so tied to the land, they noticed. Their suspicion was immediate, and it required Urihorn to, concoct a stressful explanation on the fly to placate one of the few benevolent factions in all of Barovia. The cost wasn't abstract at all. It was a brand.
And he managed that liability perfectly, didn't he? The fact that he was able to provide a convincing explanation and move on just shows his commitment was strong enough to manage that social friction. But more importantly, let's focus on the return on investment. The bonded mountain lion proved its worth instantly when they reached Tselenka Pass.
Okay.
The party's ascent to the Amber Temple was stopped cold by a formidable defensive structure. We're talking a 20-foot-high wall, a portcullis, wicked spikes, and a perpetual wall of green flame. I mean, this thing was a showstopper, a military barrier. The cat, able to scramble the near-vertical cliff face, provided the vital bypass. That demonstrated immediate strategic utility. It moves the party from absolute deadlock to progress. That, to me, outweighs the abstract metaphysical cost.
My concern is that we're prioritizing a temporary means over the inherent cost of those means. Urihorn pays this heavy, known existential cost, a piece of itself for a goal, the Mist Token, whose specific long-term utility against Strahd is, well, it's undefined. He made a permanent sacrifice based on a generalized promise. The short-term benefit of climbing a wall, while useful for that one afternoon, just doesn't seem to justify the potential for long-term spiritual danger. To the Mardukovs, being shadowless implies you're tainted. Maybe you made a pact, or worse, you've already fallen prey to Strahd. It's a vulnerability that requires constant mental energy to conceal.
Let's delve into that a bit more deeply. The strategic gain versus this existential vulnerability. I concede the shadows and metaphysical cost, but the Tselenka Pass was an equally potent physical representation of Barovia's opposition. We are talking about overcoming a literal fortress. The mountain lion bond enabled the breach of an obstacle that could have cost the party weeks, or forced an immensely costly frontal assault. The ability to bypass that is not a minor footnote. It is a direct, measurable strategic return.
I understand the tactical necessity of bypassing the gate. I do. But the cause compromises Urihorn's identity in a way that risks catastrophic exposure later on. In Barovia, the shadow is often seen as a tangible piece of the soul. Losing it isn't just losing your shade. It is fundamentally diminishing your essence. This unnatural state, it makes him a magnetic target. If he later interacts with genuinely good entities, that shadowless state won't just result in suspicion, it could result in automatic hostility. And what about the dark powers themselves? They demanded the price. Do we really believe the entity that took his shadow no longer retains some kind of claim, a subtle connection to him? He is now carrying a vulnerability that only benefits the enemy.
The entity retains a claim, yes, but Urihorn consciously accepted that. To operate against Strahd, one must accept that the conventional rules of morality, of light and shadow, they are suspended. He traded a potential future spiritual complication for immediate tangible power. If he had waited, they might have been trapped at Tselenka Pass indefinitely. The fact that the cat allowed them to continue their primary mission proves the decision was sound in the immediate tactical sense.
But this leads perfectly into our second point, the nature of the mission and the consequence. I'm sorry, I just don't buy that the Mist Token was truly necessary to achieve the Mountain Lion bot. The source material details Urihorn, an expert woodsman, tracking the predator meticulously. He gathers specific herbs, the night's bloom and the whisper leaf, and tufts of the cat's own fur. He was performing this masterwork of primal communion, He was already 90% of the way there using his skill.
And that 90% was insufficient?
Exactly. He paid an immense existential price for an artifact that simply facilitated the final 10% of the bond. Was the mist token truly necessary, or did he just take a shortcut out of impatience? A shortcut that left him permanently diminished when patience and skill might have achieved the same result without the sacrifice. He could have returned the next day. This suggests the shadow loss was an avoidable, extravagant cost.
That's an interesting point, though I would frame it differently. You're looking at the bond as a natural expertise challenge. I see it as a political challenge within Barovia. The mist token represents the necessary step past the limits of conventional expertise when facing a foe like Strahd. Pure expertise is not enough there. You need the extraordinary, the unnatural to fight an unnatural enemy. The token ensured the bond was not merely one of respect, but a bond of absolute command. This let the cat perform feats like that near-vertical climb under fire that a naturally befriended beast might refuse. He accelerated his power curve precisely because time was a luxury they did not have. He traded a theoretical moral purity for immediate, consolidated, actionable power. That is a tactical win.
But that actionable power came packaged with a compromised moral framework. This commitment to necessary brutality is evident later, isn't it? We see this shift in the group when they encounter the fatally injured maiden who fell with her cart. The party, newly hardened by this philosophy, made the callous decision to abandon her. They just continue on their way. The shadow loss set the stage for this new, brutalized morality. But this is where the commitment breaks down.
I would say it's the ultimate expression of the tactical mindset required to win in Barovia. The sacrifice of the shadow prepared him and the party psychologically for the ruthlessness the survival demands. They couldn't save her, and spending time on it would have risked the entire mission. They stayed focused.
And yet, this focus, this hardening, this existential sacrifice, it all failed. This brings us to the most crushing evidence against this strategy, the ultimate failure at Selenka Pass. Despite the utility of the cat and despite Urihorn's hardening, shortly after this transformation, they suffered a devastating loss. Traxador was slain by the abyssal of rocks that appeared. The party was so defeated, so spent, that they abandoned the mission to the Amber Temple entirely. They retreated back down the mountain. The existential sacrifice did not guarantee mission success. Instead, it preceded a profound tactical failure and retreat.
I would argue that the mission failed due to the sheer, unforeseen power of the Vrox, not because of Urihorn's commitment. He secured the means to access the temple. The sudden, devastating intervention of abyssal demons derailed the plan. The means were sound. The execution was excellent. The external circumstances were simply overwhelming. To claim that losing a shadow somehow invited the Vrox is, speculative.
I think it's more than speculative. It's a question of alignment. The Vrox, being abyssal, are fundamentally antithetical to the normal Barovian forces. The party had made this extreme sacrifice within the Barovian framework to gain an advantage, yet when the ultimate test arrived, it came not from Barovia's typical horrors, but from an outside, purely destructive planar force. Did Urihorn's compromise, his spiritual branding, make him magnetically attractive to all forms of darkness? The fact that they gained this power and immediately suffered a shattering, mission-ending loss suggests the spiritual scales were tipped decisively against them by the cost they paid.
The correlation between the sacrifice and the Vrock attack is circumstantial at best. We have to acknowledge that Traxador's death was a crushing blow, an event that would necessitate retreat regardless of whether Urihorn had a shadow or not. The decision to retreat was a functional necessity, not a reflection of the commitment's failure. The Beastmaster commitment provided the path. It did not guarantee immortality against abyssal forces.
But the compromise remains a ticking clock. Urihorn is now permanently diminished. His vulnerability isn't hidden, it's visibly apparent to any entity sensitive to the flow of souls and darkness. This vulnerability defines his future interactions in Barovia, whether the mission progresses today or a year from now. You paid a permanent cost for a temporary, fleeting advantage that resulted only in failure and profound loss.
That is the definition of a bad bargain.
Look, Urihorn made a calculated, necessary commitment. He exchanged an abstract, existential state, a shadow, for concrete, immediate power required to challenge Strahd. The evidence of the wall climb shows the strategic merit of the sacrifice, even if the overall mission was later stalled by the devastating reality of combat. The commitment was correct. The ensuing combat was tragic.
And while the resulting beast bond was undeniably useful for that specific task, the cost of losing the shadow represents a corrupting debt that compromises Urihorn's essence. In the end, this kind of existential compromise, it rarely results in a net gain, especially when the overall strategy that necessitated it still led directly to profound loss, exhaustion, and the forced abandonment of the mission. The trade was fundamentally unequal.
The dilemma remains stark for anyone trying to operate within the extreme brutality of Barovia. Does the pursuit of absolute good, or in this case, absolute revenge, justify trading foundational aspects of the self for fleeting tactical gains?
And the question for our listeners when confronting an enemy like Strahd is whether any cost, even one that diminishes the soul, can ever truly lead to victory, or if it simply makes you a more potent instrument for the very darkness you aim to conquer. We still have much more to explore in the consequences of this.
Always a pleasure to analyze the true cost of power in Barovia.